Welcome aboard, everyone. Thursday afternoon and time for the Hockey Debates podcast. As always, I'm joined by my fellow hockey debater, Kevin Allen. I'm Bob Duff. And today our special guest is a well-known hockey figure who's had one of the more interesting lives of people that I know in the hockey business. We're joined by Rob Simpson, obviously Sirius XM. He's well-known from that. He's a published author. And I want to start with that right off the bat, Rob. I loved your book, No Heavy Lifting. I love the title. I love the cover shot of all the different media passes you've gathered over the years. I have all mine stored away, and I've always wondered, what am I going to do with them? I should have thought of that before you did, but you beat me to that. Just talk a little bit about that book. I mean, it's a unique sports book. It really is, because it's not really, in some senses, a sports book, because it's stories about stuff that had nothing to do with sports.
Yeah, thank you, Duffer. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Doing great, thanks. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. That thing had been sitting around on the side. I think I wrote a couple chapters of that book, I'm not kidding you, 25 years ago. Before I actually ever had a hockey book published, I was always like, okay, at some point I'm going to write a book. And I saved these chapters about covering the NBA and Larry Bird and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as a 16-year-old, and literally wrote the two chapters back then about that experience. And then they just sat there. And then gradually I got so many weird, crazy things going on and did so many different adventures here, there, and everywhere. I was like, hey, you know what? I could probably start putting this thing together. So yeah, there's hockey, there's other sports, there's some politics, there's Hawaii, there's some travel adventures. There's the sad story of Steve Montador. But it was fun. And the cover was neat. It was kind of a fun thing to shoot, actually. Kind of a pain in the arse, but it was fun too.
Rob, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on, even though, there's been no sports, I think we've all been sort of digging around trying to ascertain what the landscape will look like when we come back and try to play, because it's pretty clear they're going to try to play without fans in the stands. And it seems to me that
technology. This happens quite frequently.
Yeah, I get you. I'm actually trying to plug in so I don't lose my.
There we go.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Okay. No fans there, and try to keep the risk at a minimum. And I like it, and I'm excited about that. I think we need to play. I think we're all going a little batty, isolating and trying to avoid getting the virus. But saying all that, I'm really concerned about the answer to one question: what happens if one player tests positive, and then what happens if multiple players test positive? And I'm told, well, we're going to test regularly, but that doesn't answer the question. How? Because it really affects two important issues. One being the most important, which is the safety of the players and the safety of everyone involved. But secondly, it affects competition as well. If the Bruins are playing the Maple Leafs in a playoff series, and players from both teams end up testing positive, what happens? Is it a double forfeit? Right. Are they out? Right. How do we move ahead? Yeah. What's your thought on all that?
I'm going to stick with my original thought. I just tweeted this out. I'm going to say, I don't know, February, and it was just based on logic and kind of hearing how this thing had unfolded around the world. And it was, I think we're going to go around and around and around until we get, and I hate to say it, till we get to the vaccine stage. Now, again, that's an uneducated statement to a degree that we don't really know how this thing will unfold or how it will work, and if people become immune, and if you get herd immunity, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's kind of unfolding with that initial kind of logic-based thought that how do you stop it from kind of going around and around and around? Are you going to, based on your scenario, Kevin, are you going to literally test every single guy that comes through, every single person that's working at the rink, covering the game, officiating the game, and then get full positive clearance for that team, the entire operation, the other team? Okay, let's play hockey. Okay. And then that's over. And then you got to, okay, now you bring in the next team and the next team. I think that's asking a hell of a lot. And as you pointed out, it's not just, and actually somebody had written an article, not sure where, maybe 2 weeks ago, just kind of pointing out all the people that have to be involved, even if you don't have fans. So it's a tall task, and I think it's just going to be a matter of patience and waiting to see where this thing goes, learning a little bit more about it. But worst case, it's vaccine or nothing.
Well, yeah, that's one of my issues is it almost might be worse if we restart and then we just have too many people testing positive and then we got to shut it down again. Like, I think that's almost
which
worse.
Which would be horrible.
Yeah.
You're right. It'd be ridiculous. It's kind of like the people that are pushing to open this, open that, open this, open that, realizing that, well, guess what? That might backfire on you. It's this kind of the same concept.
And history kind of shows us that's what happened. And, granted it was a century ago, but, the only comparable we have is the 1918-19 NHL season. And, North America reopened quickly after the first bout with the Spanish flu. And it was a tragic mistake because the disease just spiked even worse the second time around in the fall of 1919. And, an NHL player died during the regular season. And then, of course, so many players got sick during the Stanley Cup final, they had to call it off, and one of those players died. So, I just think the potential for PR nightmare here, even beyond, the potential tragic outcome. If you start testing NHL players regularly and they still haven't mastered a way to get everyday folks tested. Now, I know the rich and the famous always go to the front of the line for everything. That's a fact of life. But I don't think you want to be rubbing that in people's noses while people are dying.
Right. Well, the one justification is, well, it'll give all these people something to do at home. They'll at least even though they can't go to the game, they'll be able to watch the game. So we're doing you a service. I mean, that's like, that would be their only little caveat to that whole thing. And by the way, when you mentioned 1918-19, I go back to 1918 and the Seattle Metropolitans winning the Cup, being the first American-based team to win a Stanley Cup, obviously under a different whole look. Have you guys heard the nickname rumor yet about the Seattle team?
Kraken was the latest
one. What is
Mm.
that? Do we have an initial reaction? Because I'm like, no, thank you. Kraken, was that the dealie?
Yeah, it's apparently a mythical sea monster. I think they just want to use it from, I think it was the movie Remember the Titans. There's a scene where they go release the Kraken and the sea monster comes out. So I bet the marketing guy thinks, wouldn't that be great to have him come on the ice and have that clip, Joan?
Well, it's a pretty popular commercial. It was in the U.S. too. It shows, they have two golf brought announcers, talking in whisper as the guy's preparing to try to chip onto the green, and he tries to go over the water, and the Kraken comes out and steals the ball, and then they just work in the Kraken as if it's just a hazard that you have to deal with. It's quite a memorable commercial, and I think because of that, I think a lot of people thought Kraken was
a good idea,
going to be the name.
So that means a sea monster insignia, I would think, some type of face or head or body, or that would be what they would be thinking there. I love the Metros. Like, I just love the Metropolitans. It's a great bar in Seattle. I don't know if it's still there, called the Metropolitan, but I don't know if I don't know
what how boy, it just has to be so frustrating for Gary Bettman. I mean, here he's had it's such a success with the Vegas Golden Knights coming on. I mean, they come aboard and they're the leading revenue producer in terms of ticket sales in the league. And, they've just been just the perfect expansion franchise. They've been successful right away and all the glitz. And they really added, like, I don't think you could design and create a franchise that helped the league more than the Vegas Golden Knights did. And then, they got Seattle waiting on the wing, which sort of completes their Western. And then we have this, they go on, which really is disruptive, to the whole process. And along that lines, Rob, I want to ask you too, because I was thinking about if the season ends up getting canceled, like, I know we're going to give it a go and try it again, but there's a chance that will fail as well, and we'll have to cancel it. It would mean that Connor McDavid, who's been just an incredibly remarkable player in my estimation, is going to spend in his first 5 seasons no playoffs in 4 of them. And just what a loss that is, for hockey. Like, the NHL needs Connor McDavid in the playoffs just because of the way he plays. And like, I just like to go watch the Oilers play just to see him because, speed is one thing. We have a lot of fast players in the league, but boy, the way he plays at that speed is just so remarkable to me. And I just think it's a shame. And what a loss it's been in my mind that the Oilers have been terrible, that they haven't been able to get in. But your thoughts on what Connor David has done in his first, 5 seasons and the loss of not seeing him in the postseason. Hopefully it'll happen this year. But
yeah, well, what pops into my head first of all is just the bad luck for this kid, the timing of it. And some might argue that the draft lottery itself, you remember the look on his face. I mean, it's okay
right
now, but it was like, are you me?
Yeah.
When it was like, he was kind of like, and everybody else was like, shut up, Edmonton again. So that was kind of a little, tough. And then obviously, you move through that. Then the collarbone, and Artemi Panarin wins the Calder just basically because, he misses so much time. It's odd that Gretzky didn't win it coming from the WHA. And then McDavid doesn't win it because of the injury. Made me look like a genius because I picked Panarin at the beginning of the season, kind of like out of a hat almost. But you have that bad luck. You have the goofy stuff in 18-19 with, the coaches out and then the GM's out. And just to wrap those two teams together, Kevin, this season, it's actually not giant surprise, but maybe one of the middle ground surprises. Like Edmonton was probably, Draisaitl's incredible, but slightly ahead of where they were in a playoff spot. Vegas on top of the division when it all ended, after taking a little dip for a while. So they're actually producing, and it was going to be, two great reasons, as you point out, getting a chance to see McDavid and then getting that Vegas brand and product back into the madness that took them all the way to the final against the Capitals a couple of years ago.
Well, I wanted to ask you about another thing that you ventured into during your illustrious career, Rob. Now, I can't remember, was it 30 and 30 or was there 31 teams when you did the 30?
31 and 31.
31
it was
31.
November 16th of 18 to December 16th. And it was 31 consecutive nights, 31 different NHL rinks.
Players complain about 3 and 4 nights. They get to fly on a charter. You had to fly commercial, I'm assuming, and hit 31 cities in 31 days. That must have been.
The biggest pain in the arse actually was, which made it really kind of dicey, was I had to do the radio show every morning before I was able to then move myself to whatever airport I was headed to and then get to the next city for that game that night. So there was no 6 a.m. flights, 7 a.m., 9 a.m. flights available to me. I wasn't able to start even looking for flights until kind of the noonish hour because of the fact that I had to do the 7 to 10 Eastern talk show, which I was on that first week from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. from the Pacific time zone. So I had like friends cooking me breakfast. I'd be like sitting in a shed in the backyard, like this one house. Guy brings me scrambled eggs. A buddy of mine, like it was like 4:30 in the morning. Just stuff like that. But yeah, the opportunity, the best part about it was just seeing everybody from all the different teams. Cause I worked for various clubs, been on the charters, traveled around the entire league for years and, know most all the various game day people and some of the people involved. So that was probably the coolest part, was catching up with a lot of different people in rinks that I hadn't been into for a while. There was only one dicey spot, Duffer, and that was literally fourth day. I had a flight cancel from Vancouver down to the San Jose area, and I was literally I was on that little tram going to the Vancouver airport, this air train thingy, like freaking out on my phone, going, "You are an absolute donkosaurus that you're going to blow this thing on day 4." I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. But I just got lucky. I walked into the airport, blah, 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 and dude hooked me up with a flight that actually was more direct and got in faster. And I ended up flying into San Francisco instead of San Jose and then cruising down. But I was going through Seattle originally, oddly enough, and all the flights were canceled going through Seattle. And that's how I almost got screwed. But after day 4, smooth sailing for the most part. So I didn't have any issues, didn't miss any hockey at all. And I got a puck signed by every first intermission. I'd go to the officials' room, and I saw some of these guys 5, 6, 7 times. It was just weird on the schedule. And I had one of the referees in every rink sign a game puck. And they brought him off the ice for me. They knew about it. I worked through hockey ops. They knew I was doing it. So dude would knock on the door. I'd go in every day. Hey, fellas. And they would give me a puck signed, and then I'd wander off and see him the next day. It's pretty crazy. That was my verification.
Maybe we should give more thought to letting Seattle back in the league. It seems like every time Seattle gets involved in hockey, something goes wrong. We've had 2 pandemics now. They almost messed up your 31 and 31. Maybe.
Yeah, that's right. I was always skeptical when this concept first came up. I don't know, however many years ago. I was skeptical about Seattle because I had been up there. I'd been to Seattle 40 times. I used to broadcast minor league hockey and baseball in the region, which took me to Seattle 6 to 8 to 10 times a year for either sport. Tacoma in the case of a minor league hockey team, and Everett and Bellingham in terms of minor league baseball. And having done some stuff for Leafs TV out there as well, where I was looking at the Seattle T-Birds and the Western League and their attendance, and then the Everett team came around, Tacoma went belly up. I was like, I don't know, it's a pretty crispy, crunchy scene up there. I don't know if NHL hockey would fly, but I don't know. Everything's kind of changed, and Vegas really kind of changed the mindset. So I'm open-minded to the future, where probably 10 years ago I'd have been like, God, don't try and put a team in Seattle.
I was in the Saskatoon for 4 years as a Western Hockey League beat writer, so Seattle was one of those road trips where the fans were pretty crazy, to put it lightly. So these Marcel Como, who was the Blades coach, called them buckets of beer. He said the fans were pretty lit by the third period. And
yeah,
Marcel had some great quotes, but I think his all-time favorite that he ever gave to me was after one of the rough nights in Seattle when the fans were really going crazy. And he said, "They don't sell tickets here. It's a $7 cover charge."
It's incredible, as you can attest. It's a wonderful place. Like, it's just a beautiful area. And I had the time of my life every single time I went in there for whatever reason. But I hope it works out wonderfully if we ever get there.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us today, Rob, and taking some time with us. I know we've all got a lot of time on our hands, but it's still a pleasure to have you aboard, and maybe we'll have you back again someday when we can actually talk about actual hockey games. Wouldn't that be something?
That'd be good. And I got to just say to Kevin really quick, this is funny. So finally, after all these years, the table finally turns, because Kevin has been, when I hosted NHL Live in New York for 2 or 3 years, Kevin, I don't know if you were on once a week or twice a week.
Yeah.
And then on the Sirius XM show, you were on once a week. So you've probably been my guest 100 times. So, okay, now it's 100. Finally, it's 100 to 1.
Yeah. No,
I great. Those odds, we'll have you back.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's always great to see you guys. Thank you.
All right, see you later. Thanks, Rob.
And thanks for joining us.
See you guys.
Rob's one of my favorite people in hockey. Just a genuine guy, and his storytelling is just unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a great story about the tour there. So, he made me, when he was talking about, making the trips and everything, and it got me thinking about, multiple games and multiple nights. And, I think I'm going to start on a campaign to figure out, and you're a good place to start because of your kind of knowledge of history. But, I remember when I did the Bill Gadsby book, the late Bill Gadsby, he and I worked together. This was, a long time ago, 20 some years ago, on his book. And I remember he brought up that he was shocked that players now talk about, the difficulty of playing 3 games in 4 nights or 4 games. He goes, when I played, whenever we had multiple games in a row, like, nobody ever talked about that, And then my buddy Tom Laidlaw always thought it was the strangest thing he ever heard. Well, because he always said, when we played, and he played throughout the 80s into the 90s. He said we loved it when we'd have 3 and 4 and 4 and 5 because it meant there was no practice. You just play games. He said we all loved to play games. And I said to him, well, did you feel like you were tired? He goes, never crossed our mind, that we might be tired. So my question to you is, like, when is it that we all woke up and said, oh, geez, man, that's just too hard. Like, you can't do it. And was Scotty Bowman responsible for this? Like, is that, because, he was the first coach I remember that really paid attention to the schedule. Like, the schedules would come out and Scotty would have them all dissected in a matter of minutes. Oh, wow, we play this many back-to-backs and we do this and we do that. And prior to that, there just really wasn't much discussion. Like, you'd pay attention that you played 3 good teams in a row, or, that you were on the road for 5, for 11 days and all that. But you didn't pay that much attention to 3 and 4, 3 and 5, 5 and 7. And then all of a sudden, that became the end thing. Like, that's, we talk about that all the time now. This team had to put up with, 3 games in 4 nights, and, the back, like, they're going to be a tired hockey team tonight. They're going to be sluggish. And imagine any other profession, like if a neurosurgeon had to do surgeries on Tuesday and Wednesday, that his boss said if he had to go again on Saturday, so, oh man, he's going to be sluggish. He's just not going to be any good. Can you imagine that? Or a fireman, well, geez, man, he had 2 fires to put out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and now here's Friday again. We got another one. Like, oh no, they're just not going to be any good at the start of that fire. Like, it just seems counterintuitive that we have this expectation built in that an athlete, a finely tuned, well-conditioned athlete, who on a good night, if he's a defenseman, will play less than half the game, 25 minutes. And if he's a forward, probably will play 19 at best, maybe 20 if you're Draisaitl or Connor McDavid. Like, how did we get here? How do we? You're not going to be as good.
Yeah, well, we'll put it into our perspective. I mean, we've covered playoff series umpteen times between us, and we don't get that. Well, it was his 3rd game story in 4 nights, so it wasn't as good as the other 2. Editors expected us to be on the ball every night and have our A game. And, granted, we weren't out there getting punched in the face or hacked in the back of the ankles with a stick or having to fight anybody. But you still had to be mentally sharp every night and really stay on top of things. So, it got to be a grind, and we didn't get charters to and from the cities like the players did. We were flying commercial and dealing with delays like Rob talked about. And you weren't always staying in a 5-star hotel. Sometimes you're at the Motel 6 or who knows where. And sometimes you had to rent a car because your commercial flight got canceled. And you'd have to drive to wherever you're going next. And, we'd have to get there in time the next day for the morning skate. So you had to have a flight that left at the crack of dawn to make sure you got there to cover the skate. So, we may not have had to deal with the physical punishment that the players did, but certainly we did the mental and the emotional stuff that you go through in a playoff series. It's a grind. I can remember my first Stanley Cup final, seeing reporters like yourself who were national reporters and had to cover the whole thing no matter what team was in it. And it basically been away from home for 2 months.
Yeah.
And when it could end, the reporters were just as nervous as the players because they're all thinking, I can go home tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I remember the early years in USA Today because, as a national writer, and there weren't that many national writers, I would cover, multiple series at once. So, I didn't go, like, if we had 2 conference finals, I would go back and forth between the 2 conference finals. So pretty much I'd have a game every night. And then, occasionally there'd be some, the schedule I'd have one day where I have to go to a practice, but so I was that. But I just, sometimes I wonder whether it's just self-fulfilling in our sport. Because, we talk about it so much that the expectation is now built in. You just assume that it's going to be a problem for you if you're, you're playing 4 and 5 or 3 and 4, that third, or even on back-to-backs now. We talk about that so much, about back-to-back games. And, you just expect them to be sluggish in the first period. Well, they won't have their legs tonight. We say that, and I just wonder sometimes whether it's self-fulfilling. And I'm sure somebody must have done, with all the analytics we now have, somebody must have done a study on it. But I think even if you put a study in front of me that said teams that play in the second game of a back-to-back only win 40% of the time, I would still say, yeah, but is it because they're really tired, or because they believe they're expected to be tired and therefore not going to be as good? I think there's a mental aspect to that, that they can't be denied, that we talk about it so much in this sport. And, we all know that the mental aspect of sports is as important as the physical aspect of it. It just doesn't seem to me, because, I marvel at the conditioning level of the modern NHL player compared to, say, even 20 years ago. And it just seems to me that these athletes, given that, and I realize they go hard for, how many shifts it is during the game, but it's still, they're only playing, 25 minutes, which is 28 shifts, something like that, 30 shifts. I don't know. But
out again as soon as the game ends, they're in the room where,
no, and they're usually, on the bike, doing what they need to, be ready for the next game. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just curious about that. I may call Scotty at some point and ask him about that, because I would be surprised if that when Scotty started talking about the schedule the way he did, because I remember him, it was really unique how he approached the schedule. I wonder if he sort of started this all where, everyone started to realize, or started to believe anyway, that if you play, too many games in a condensed period, that, the weariness, and, even today, and I think this has been sort of a positive thing, coaches, which is part of the collective bargaining agreement too, because you have to have a certain amount of off days. But I think they work more with the captain to assure that, because captains sort of know if the team is mentally weary. So they say to a captain, hey, do you think this will be a good time to get a day off? So that, I think there's a positive from all that too. But it is interesting that. Do we see that as much in other sports?
Well, I was thinking about, I've covered a lot of baseball, and I don't ever recall a baseball team or a manager or players complaining, man, this is our 5th game in 5 days. I'm wiped out. I need a day off. That they play it almost every day, and they just accept that's, and, people can argue, well, it's not as physically demanding as hockey, and, maybe it isn't, but certainly baseball players get their share of injuries just like hockey players do, and they have to answer the bell every day. I mean, you marvel at a guy who plays 82 hockey games. Well, what about a guy who plays 162 baseball games?
Yeah,
like every day showing up and playing the whole game.
Yeah.
When you mentioned Scotty though and the schedule, what came to mind with me was when I first started covering the Red Wings in the the late 80s. They always seemed to start out west. Either they were in Edmonton and Calgary when you didn't, nobody went through Edmonton and Calgary in the 80s and came away with 2 wins. You were lucky to come away with 1. Or they were going out to California. They always, because the circus was always at Joe Louis Arena in October. So they would always start on the road. It seemed like they were always coming home. They're off to an 0-3-1 start or whatever. They're always digging out of a hole. And Scotty came in, and all of a sudden the circus didn't come to town in October anymore. And they weren't starting on these ridiculous West Coast road trips anymore. And I always thought, you talk about how he would obsess about things. I always thought that was definitely a Scotty move. And I can just hear Scotty screaming in the meeting, what the hell is the circus doing here in October? We got to play hockey.
Yeah. I always marveled, and I'm sure you did too, with Scotty, the level of conversations you had with him as a writer, especially if you were a national writer. I think he was a little harder on local writers than he was on national writers. But you could just have some fascinating conversations with him. How he viewed the game and what he thought about. And I always loved interviewing him because you always, as a reporter, wanted to take the post game interview in the direction that fit your story. But Scotty had his own agenda, and he took the interview where he wanted it to go. So, you may ask about the power play, and he would, talk about, the effort or the officiating or whatever he wanted to talk about that night. And, basically because he's Scotty Bowman, the greatest coach ever, that's generally where you went. You went with him, if that's where he was going to, go. And, I remember he was, I always felt like he was brutally honest. If you remember anybody who followed the Red Wings, it was just verboten in the National Hockey League to pass the puck in front of your net. I mean, how many years have you said that to kids when they're 9 and 10 years old? Whatever you do, don't pass it in front of your net. Well, when Scotty was coaching the Red Wings in their glory years in the late 90s, all of a sudden they started passing the puck in front of their net as a way to escape the zone, because the pressure would be on the puck carrier behind the goal line. And suddenly there'd be this little 6-foot pass. Usually Lidstrom would make it. That would pass in front. And then somebody would be out of the zone and gone. And, and you'd look at it and you go, oh, Scotty's going to hate that. And then you start to think, well, maybe this was Scotty's idea, that since nobody was doing it, that, Red Wings were novel in this approach. And so I thought, I'm going to do this story, because now a lot of teams use that little pass that used to be verboten for about 40 years, forbidden. Nobody would do that. No, you don't throw the puck in front of your own zone. And so I asked him about it, and I assumed he would say, yeah, I just decided that was weird. And he goes, no, that was all Nick Lidstrom. Nick Lidstrom did it. He would pass out front because he felt it was a good option. And then whoever had the puck got it out of the zone, and everybody saw Nick do it, and they thought, well, if Nick can do it, I can do it. And they started doing it too. He said, so really, I really didn't have anything to do with it. And I said, yeah, but you didn't say don't ever do it. And he said, well, no, I didn't do that.
Well, I think my favorite, you talk about trying to get Scotty to talk about what you want. You had to learn how to kind of nuance it with Scotty, where you waited for that opening to get that question in that you knew would take him in that direction. I remember when one year they were playing St. Louis in the playoffs. And when Scotty coached the Canadiens in 1972, late in the season, they were staying in St. Louis after a road game there, and there was a fire in their hotel. And some of the players came very close to not getting out. And I wanted to ask him about that, but I knew if I just came out and said, hey, Scotty, what happened in that fire in St. Louis? You'd never get the story. So I waited till one day he just happened to be talking about the hotel they were staying in. They had switched hotels during the playoffs because I guess they had lost the previous time in, and he wanted to change their luck. And he started talking about how much he liked this hotel. And I just kind of subtly said, so Scotty, the night you were here with Montreal and they had the fire, what hotel were you in then? And he said, well, that was the Hilton. And he went on and on. He just told, hey, Scotty nearly didn't make it out himself. He said that he was literally out on his balcony looking down at the swimming pool. I think he said he was on the 7th floor thinking about jumping. And he said, in typical Scotty fashion, though, at the end of the story, it all came back to hockey. He said, that fire cost us the Stanley Cup. And I said, well, how's that, Scott? He said, well, Serge Savard had to kick his window out to get out. And he cut his leg open and he missed the playoffs.
That's Scotty.
Well, as usual, we are out of time before we're out of stuff to talk about. We'll be back again on Monday. Kevin and I and a special guest will entertain you with some more hockey stories and some more hockey debates. This has been the Hockey Debates Podcast. I'm Bob Duff. He's Kevin Allen. Everybody have yourself a great day.